Rain was falling so steadily that night it sounded like the forest was breathing. The old cabin creaked under the wind, and the gutters overflowed, dripping along the windows. Caleb sat near the small stove, mending a lantern wire, when a faint scratching noise reached him from the porch door. At first, he thought it was a branch. Then it came again, slow, deliberate, like claws against glass. He stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and walked to the back door. Through the wet pane, two golden eyes met his. A lynx. She stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, with something limp hanging from her mouth. For a long second, neither moved. The animal didn't growl or retreat. She only stared, breathing heavily, as water streamed down her fur. Caleb lowered the flashlight, careful not to shine it in her face. The small shape she carried twitched, a cub. Its fur clung to its ribs, eyes half closed. Caleb's first instinct was to step back and close the door, but something in the lynx's gaze stopped him. She wasn't hunting. She was waiting. He unlocked the latch and opened the door just a crack. The rain poured in. The lynx didn't move until he stepped aside, creating a small path toward the summer kitchen, a separate room attached to the cabin. She padded in silently, her paws leaving dark prints on the floorboards. Caleb kept his distance, watching as she crossed to the far corner and gently set the cub down on a torn rug. He found an old blanket, laid it near the wall, and turned on the space heater to its lowest setting. The lynx watched every movement, ears twitching, muscles tight. Caleb placed a bowl of water several feet away and backed out of the room, leaving the door open just enough for her to feel untrapped. From the hallway, he dialed Dana Ellis, the local wildlife biologist. When she answered, her voice was calm but sharp. "Keep the light low. Don't get closer. Warm air, no noise. She'll stay if she feels safe." Caleb nodded, though she couldn't see him. "And don't touch the cub," she added. "They're wild-born. Let her handle it. I'll be there first thing tomorrow." The night stretched long. The wind shifted, carrying pine scent and the distant groan of trees. The heater hummed softly. Every now and then, Caleb peeked in. The lynx hadn't moved, lying curled around her cub, licking its fur. He brewed coffee and sat by the window, trying not to think too much. Years of living alone had made silence his closest companion, but that night, the quiet felt alive, fragile. Near midnight, someone knocked on the front porch, 2 short taps. Caleb opened to find Elliot, his neighbor from down the slope, holding a portable heater under his coat. "Saw your light," Elliot said. "Power flickered here too. Thought you might need this." Caleb hesitated, then whispered, "There's a lynx in the kitchen." Elliot blinked. "You serious?" "With a cub," Caleb said quietly. "She's hurt, maybe." Elliot looked toward the door, saw the faint shape through the glass, and exhaled. "You always get the strange kind of visitors," he muttered. He set the heater down. "Keep it warm. I'll check back in the morning." When the door shut again, the night settled back into its rhythm. Caleb sat near the hallway, listening to the heater hum and the steady rain outside. Once, the lynx lifted her head and looked straight at him through the dim light. He didn't move. He only nodded slowly, as if making a silent promise. Just before dawn, he dozed off in the chair. A sudden sound woke him, the creak of the outer door. He rushed to the kitchen. The lynx was gone. The blanket was empty except for a faint warmth where she had lain. The rain had stopped. He stood there for a long moment, unsure whether to feel relieved or hollow. Then, a low noise at the porch made him turn. There she was again, wet paws on the wood, breathing fast. And this time, in her jaws, she carried another cub, even smaller, limp but alive. The morning light came pale and cold through the dripping trees. Caleb had barely slept. When the sound of tires crunching on gravel reached him, he stepped outside, rubbing his eyes. A dark SUV stopped near the porch. Dana Ellis climbed out, her jacket still zipped to the throat, a field bag slung over her shoulder. She looked exactly as she sounded on the phone. Steady, focused, no time for pleasantries. "Where is she?" Dana asked quietly. Caleb pointed toward the summer kitchen. The door stood half open, and through it he could see the lynx crouched in the far corner. 2 small shapes pressed against her chest. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet pine and soil. Dana slipped on a pair of nitrile gloves and opened her bag. "I'll keep my distance. You stay near the door," she said. She crouched slowly, voice low, almost a whisper. The lynx watched but didn't move, ears twitching. Dana spread a towel near the cubs and, using another folded cloth as a barrier, lifted one gently for a few seconds. She touched its ear, then its belly. "Cold. Too cold," she murmured. The cub shivered faintly. Caleb felt the weight of her tone. "Can they make it? If we keep them warm and hydrated, maybe," she said, already preparing a small syringe. She drew a clear liquid and gave the tiniest subcutaneous dose behind the cub's shoulder. "It's just electrolyte solution. No drugs." She demonstrated how to heat water bottles and wrap them in cloth before placing them around the cubs, not too close. "Warmth and quiet," she repeated. "No food yet. No milk. Their stomachs can't take it." Caleb fetched towels from the bathroom and warmed them near the heater. He handed one to her, keeping his eyes on the lynx. The animal tensed but didn't strike. Instead, she adjusted her position, curling tighter around the cubs, her breathing heavy but calm. Her fur steamed faintly in the warmth. Dana kept working in silence for several minutes, noting details in a small field notebook. She spoke softly as she worked, explaining each step to Caleb. Heart for him, heart to steady the air between them. Dehydration first. That's what kills most small cats. Once we see some movement, she'll take over. The hours passed quietly. The heater hummed, and the forest beyond the windows glistened in the new light. Caleb brewed coffee, offered her a mug, which she accepted with a tired smile. The smell filled the room, grounding them in something ordinary. By noon, the cubs had stopped shivering. The stronger one stretched its legs, giving a faint squeak. Dana watched, relief softening her voice. "That's a good sign." Caleb nodded, exhaling for the first time in hours. "You think she knows what we're doing?" Dana glanced at the lynx. "She knows you're not a threat. That's enough." The calm broke with the sound of another engine outside, a truck this time. Heavy footsteps followed. A man's voice called out, rough and impatient. Caleb's shoulders stiffened. "That'll be Rick Parsons, town supervisor. Word travels fast around here." Dana sighed. Perfect timing. Rick appeared in the doorway, cap pulled low, jacket stained with mud. He froze when he saw the lynx. "You can't be serious," he said. "That's a predator. You've got it sitting 5 feet from your kitchen." Caleb stayed calm. "She came here on her own. She's not attacking anyone. For now," Rick snapped. "Tomorrow she could drag someone's dog off the porch. I need this handled." Dana stood between them, voice steady. "No one is handling anything today. These cubs won't last another hour without warmth. Give us until morning. Then I'll assess relocation." Rick frowned. "I don't like it." "You don't have to like it," she replied. "You just have to let me do my job." The silence hung thick. The lynx growled low, barely audible, but enough to make Rick step back. He looked at Caleb. "You're taking responsibility for this. You understand?" "I do," Caleb said quietly. Dana reached into her bag and pulled out a printed sheet, a quick draft of safety guidelines she always carried. She handed it to Rick. "One night. Keep neighbors away. No loud noises. No dogs." Rick took the paper, grumbling under his breath. "You two better know what you're doing." When he left, the quiet returned. Dana sat on the floor, shoulders sinking. Every time, people fear what they don't understand. Caleb checked the heater, adjusted it slightly. The lynx was still, her eyes half closed. The cubs slept close to her chest, their breathing steadier now. The light outside turned gold. Dana wrote a few notes, closed her notebook, and finally allowed herself to relax. "They might make it," she said softly. Caleb almost smiled. "Then that's something." From the porch came a faint shuffle, a scraping sound like claws on wood. Both turned. The lynx lifted her head, ears alert. Caleb stepped closer to the door and froze. Through the half-open doorway, another small shape appeared, a third cub, tiny and trembling, dragging itself forward through the leaves toward its mother. The third cub barely moved when Dana lifted it with the towel. Its fur was damp, its breath shallow, ribs fluttering with every weak exhale. The mother lynx crouched nearby, her muscles tense, but her eyes fixed on the tiny form. Caleb held his breath. The room felt smaller with all 3 of them inside. The faint hiss of the heater, the smell of wet fur, the sharp tang of antiseptic from Dana's kit. Dana checked the cub's temperature with the back of her gloved hand, then placed it between 2 wrapped bottles of warm water. "He's colder than the others. That's the real danger now," she said softly. "If he can't regulate heat, his organs start shutting down." Caleb crouched near the door, watching. Should we feed him something? She shook her head. Not yet. Never feed before he's warm. His stomach can't handle milk or formula cold. Heat and hydration first. She reached for another syringe and drew a small measure of clear fluid. A few drops under the skin, that's all. Just to give him a chance. Caleb nodded, even though his chest ached watching it. The lynx let out a low sound, half growl, half question, but didn't move closer. Dana kept her posture low and calm, her hands steady. When the needle slipped under the skin, the cub barely flinched. Minutes passed like hours. Dana wiped her hands, then leaned against the counter. "This is the line," she said finally. "We help enough for her to finish what we started. But if we do more, we take it from her. Wild mothers don't forgive that easily." Caleb looked at the animal in the corner, her fur still steaming slightly from the earlier rain. "Feels wrong to do so little." Dana gave a small nod. "It always does. But sometimes restraint is the only thing that saves them." They worked in silence after that. Every 20 minutes, they checked the bottles and turned them gently to keep the heat even. The cubs made faint squeaks. The weakest one twitched, trying to move closer to the warmth. Dana marked the time in her notebook. Caleb noticed how methodically she worked. No panic, no rush, every motion controlled. It reminded him of the way he used to repair engines before his hands started shaking years ago. He broke the silence without meaning to. "Haven't had anyone in this house in a long time," he said. "Got used to the quiet." Dana kept her eyes on the cub. "Quiet's not bad," she said, "as long as it's not empty." He gave a dry laugh. "Guess it's been both for a while." She didn't respond right away. "You're doing good," she said eventually. Most people would have locked the door and called it someone else's problem. By afternoon, the sky had turned pale gray again. The sound of another vehicle broke the calm. Caleb peeked through the window and swore under his breath. "Rick's back, and he brought company." 2 men stepped out of the truck with him, neighbors from the valley, carrying flashlights and the kind of look that came from worry more than anger. Rick raised his hand to knock, but Caleb was already outside. "You can't keep that thing here," one of the men said. "What if she attacks? What if she's got rabies?" Dana joined them at the doorway, calm but firm. "She doesn't. I checked for symptoms. And she hasn't left the property except to bring her cubs back. She's not hunting, she's protecting." Rick crossed his arms. "The council called me twice today. They want her gone." "Then tell them we're doing this by the book," Dana replied. "One more night. If the cubs stabilize, she'll move them herself. If not, I'll contact wildlife transport first thing tomorrow." The other men exchanged looks. Rick exhaled sharply through his nose. "One night. But if anyone gets hurt, it's on you." "On me," Caleb said quietly. "Not her." Dana gave him a quick glance, not gratitude, exactly, but acknowledgement. The men left after setting a few boundaries. No visitors, no noise, no dogs. Caleb watched their taillights vanish into the mist, then turned back to the yard. The tension in his shoulders stayed long after the sound faded. As daylight waned, he worked outside, building a makeshift barrier with spare boards and wire mesh, enough to mark the space as off-limits. The sound of his hammering echoed softly in the wet air. Dana stood by the doorway, watching him work. She didn't offer help, just let him focus, the rhythm of wood and nail steadying both of them. When evening settled, they checked the cubs again. The weakest still breathed unevenly, but the tremors had eased. Dana refilled the water bottles and prepared another small dose of fluid. "He's holding on," she said quietly. "Just barely." Caleb crouched beside her, voice low. "He's tougher than he looks." The lynx shifted, ears perked. Her gaze flicked from Dana to the cub, then to Caleb. She took a slow step forward, close enough that they could see her whiskers tremble. For a moment, everything stilled, the heaters hum, the forest outside, even their breath. Dana met the animal's eyes. "It's all right," she whispered. She lifted the syringe slightly. "We're just helping." The lynx didn't back away. Instead, she watched closely, her head tilted, as if she understood. Caleb felt the fine hairs on his arms rise. When the injection was done, the cub gave a faint cry, a tiny sound, but it made the mother lean closer, almost brushing Dana's arm. For the first time, Caleb wasn't sure who was trusting whom. The morning broke with a thin silver light sliding through the trees. The air smelled of wet pine and ash from the old stove. Caleb woke on the floor, back stiff, hand still resting near the space heater. The cubs were huddled together, their fur dry now, tiny bodies rising and falling with steadier rhythm. Dana was already awake, scribbling notes in her field book. "They made it through the night," she said quietly. Her voice carried both exhaustion and relief. Caleb leaned closer, careful not to disturb the mother. The weakest cub twitched, stretching one small paw. A faint squeak followed. He smiled despite himself. "He's fighting back." "They all are," Dana replied. She checked the warmth of the bottles, turning them slightly. Body temperatures almost normal now. The lynx stirred. She rose slowly, shook off the night, and nudged one of the cubs toward her chest. Her eyes were sharp again, watchful, aware. Caleb noticed the difference immediately. There was strength in the way she moved now, a certainty that hadn't been there before. Dana watched her carefully. If she's regaining confidence, she'll start relocating them soon. Caleb frowned. "You mean she'll take them out?" "Already. It's what wild mothers do. When they think their young can survive the cold. She won't risk staying near people longer than necessary." For a while, they simply observed. The forest outside dripped in slow rhythm, the sun lifting weakly through the mist. Around mid-morning, the lynx stood, stretched, then did something that made Caleb hold his breath. She picked up the strongest cub by the scruff and padded toward the door. Dana whispered, "Stay still." They didn't move. The door was slightly ajar, and the lynx slipped through it like a shadow, the cub swinging gently from her jaws. She vanished into the tree line without a sound. Minutes passed. The quiet felt enormous. Caleb exhaled slowly. "You think she's coming back?" "If the cub survives the move," Dana said, closing her notebook. "Yes, she knows there are two more." They waited. Caleb reheated water, handed Dana a mug. The small cabin felt heavier without the lynx there, but also lighter somehow, as if a part of the story had found its direction. By noon, the sound of an engine cut through the calm again. Caleb stepped outside to find Rick Parsons' truck parked near the edge of the path. Rick climbed out, hands on his hips, scanning the yard. "Still here?" he asked. Caleb pointed at the simple wooden fence he'd finished the night before, a clean boundary line around the porch and kitchen. "She hasn't left the property except to move one cub. Everything's quiet." Rick looked over the fence, then at the forest. "Town board wants closure on this. They're nervous." Dana stepped out behind Caleb. "They'll get closure when nature decides it's done here," she said flatly. "Give us the day." She's doing what she should. The safer the process, the faster it ends. Rick studied her, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but I can't promise more time after tomorrow." "We won't need it," Dana said. "Not if she keeps moving them." Rick gave the yard one last wary glance before leaving. When his truck disappeared down the dirt road, Caleb sighed. "You think he'll back off?" "He will if she's gone by morning," Dana answered. The afternoon passed quietly. The two remaining cubs slept most of the time, occasionally shifting closer to each other. Caleb fixed the door latch, oiled the hinges, anything to keep his hands busy. Dana checked the cubs every hour, noting each small improvement. Warmer paws, stronger grip, brighter eyes. Late in the day, the forest went still again. Then, from the tree line, a shape appeared, the lynx, moving low and silent. Caleb felt his chest tighten. She slipped under the fence and stepped inside without hesitation. Her fur was damp with dew, her eyes intent. Without pausing, she reached the second cub, lifted it carefully, and turned back toward the woods. Caleb whispered, "She knows exactly what she's doing." "They always do," Dana said softly. The lynx vanished once more into the mist. The last cub remained, the smallest and frailest, the one Dana had feared might not make it. The light faded to amber, then gray. They spoke little. Dana refilled the bottles, checking their heat. Caleb sat on the floor beside the cub, a folded towel on his lap, another over his knees. The soft hum of the heater filled the silence. "He's still breathing," Dana said, crouching beside him. Slow but steady. Caleb nodded. "You ever get used to this part?" She looked at him. "No. You just learn when to let go." The cub stirred faintly, a small sound escaping its throat. Both froze. Dana leaned closer, listening. "That's strength coming back," she murmured. "He's not giving up." Outside, the wind shifted. Something moved near the porch, a low, steady sound, familiar now. Caleb looked toward the door. In the fading light, the lynx stood there again, framed by dusk, her eyes glowing softly. She didn't enter this time. She just stood and waited, her gaze fixed on the small bundle on Caleb's lap. The night was deep and still. Only the slow tick of cooling metal from the heater broke the silence. Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, a towel-wrapped cub resting in his lap. Its breathing was fragile, but steady now, each rise of its chest more certain than the last. Dana sat nearby, arms around her knees, watching in silence. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to do but wait. Outside, the rain began again, a thin, steady drizzle that whispered over the roof. The smell of wet earth drifted in through the half-open door. Somewhere beyond the trees, a night bird called. The lynx still stood at the threshold, motionless, her shape barely visible in the dark. Every few minutes, she shifted her weight, but didn't cross inside. "She's waiting for him to be ready," Dana said quietly. "They always know." Caleb nodded, eyes fixed on the cub. His hands had long gone numb from holding still, but he didn't move. The tiny heartbeat under his palm was the only thing that mattered now. Hours passed in slow rhythm. Rain, breath, heartbeat. Just before dawn, the cub stirred. It let out a faint cry, weak but alive. Dana leaned forward, her face softening. "That's it. That's the turn." The lynx took a step closer. Her fur glistened with rain, eyes glowing in the dim light. She paused just before the heater, her gaze locked on the small bundle in Caleb's lap. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then, as if some invisible line had been crossed, she leaned down and touched the cub gently with her nose. The little body twitched, and a small sound escaped it. Not fear, not pain, just recognition. The lynx exhaled softly. She looked at Caleb, her face inches from his. Her eyes were wild and calm at once, full of something wordless and ancient. Dana whispered, "Let her take him." Caleb nodded. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his hands. The lynx lifted the cub by the scruff and stepped backward toward the open air. She didn't rush. At the doorway, she stopped again and turned her head. For a brief, suspended second, her eyes met Caleb's. There was no fear there, only recognition. Then she slipped into the gray light of morning and was gone. Caleb sat motionless long after she disappeared. The towel on his knees still held the faint warmth of the cub. Dana finally stood, stretching her stiff shoulders. "You did it right," she said softly. "You gave them time." He nodded, though it didn't feel like doing anything heroic. Just necessary. Later that morning, when the sky had cleared, Dana packed her kit into the truck. "I'm heading to check the edge of the forest," she said. "You coming?" Caleb hesitated, then grabbed his jacket. The ground was slick with mud as they walked the narrow path through the trees. Birds had started calling again, faint and uncertain. At the edge of the field, Dana stopped suddenly and pointed. There, near the shadow of the tree line, stood the lynx. Her coat shimmered in the pale sun, and around her were the three cubs, thin, wobbly, but upright. They clung close to her legs, blinking into the light. Caleb felt his chest tighten. "She made it," he said quietly. "They all did," Dana replied. "Because you didn't turn her away." They stood there for a while, saying nothing. The lynx watched them for a moment, then disappeared into the woods, her tail the last thing visible between the trees. On the way back, they found Rick's truck parked near the fence. He was leaning against it, arms crossed, watching the forest. When he saw them, he didn't speak. Instead, he reached up to the post beside the gate and pulled down a damp paper notice, the warning about a dangerous predator in the area. He folded it once, tucked it into his jacket, and gave a small nod. "Guess she's not a problem anymore," he said. "Never was," Caleb answered. Rick grunted in agreement and climbed into his truck. The engine faded down the road, leaving only the sound of wind and dripping leaves. By afternoon, the rain returned, soft, rhythmic, almost comforting. Caleb sat on the porch steps with a mug of coffee cooling in his hands. The air smelled clean. Through the mist, he thought he saw a flash of movement far off, a tawny shape slipping between trees, but maybe it was only his imagination. He leaned back against the post, closed his eyes, and listened to the steady murmur of the rain. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace.